Hey guys, Manitove here with you. Today, what we're going to be doing is discussing the new RTA rune management system and going over some quality of life discussions about it. Um, let's go ahead and jump on in and take a look real quick at what I'm talking about. Now, as we all know, a couple weeks ago they dropped off this update that gave us two different rune management systems. One purely for RTA, and the other is your general use rune system. Initially, I was very excited about this, but since its release, I've found a couple of quirks that I just wanted to talk about, get some feedback on, see what you guys think about the system. The first thing was once they released it, they gave us 5 days of FRR, which was great. More weeks like that come to us, and you'll be garnering a lot more support from people like me, just because the overall burden of rune management is already tough enough as is, and that's exactly what I wanted to first discuss about. Was the first hiccup that I noticed about the new rune management system. It came with an underlying cost that most non-end game players are feeling, and that is, as you can see on my screen, the mana cost. Um, I farm a lot. I live in Necro, Giants, Dragons. I do my rifts, farm the crystals, and all that fun stuff. So typically, you would think a player like me that spends a lot of time farming would have a surplus of the little blue crystals. But like I mentioned before, they introduced that 5 days of FRR, which motivated me to go ahead and give a shot at RTA for the first time since its inception into the game, because I don't think I've really participated since Season 1. But I found after that FRR had completed, there were some aspects of the rune management system that weren't clearly labeled, and that is the fact of runes in the runes management system for RTA prohibit you from selling or destroying runes that are engraved on RTA units. So if you have them equipped here in the World Arena, we'll go ahead and take a look at Second Vela Jewel, because I don't use this unit, and it is basically just been sitting in my storage for a while, but it does have a couple of decent runes on it. If I want to remove these runes, I have to pay the rune removal cost. Fair enough. But depending on what I'm removing these runes for, whether it be PvE or PvP related, there's two different screens I have this option to do that at. So you innately doubled the cost of certain elements being changed when you're trying to reallocate your runes for whatever purpose it may need. So that's the one thing, that the big striking thing that stood out to me. Like I said, I farm a lot, and I'm constantly mana starved, because there's certain types of players in this game that I find different ways to enjoy it, which is great. That's what it's supposed to be. Some people really like just focusing 100% on RTA. That's all they do every day, 30 wings, and then once they're out of their wings, they do test matches and all that fun. That's great. Other players like to do the PvE content, where they focus purely on just logging in to do the TOA and do rift runs, and that's great too. Others like to do Guild War, Guild Siege. So the issue I'm finding that with the double rune management system is the application for middle of the road players, to where I do some RTA, but I don't live in RTA. I do participate actively in Guild Siege and Guild Wars, and I also chase the bragging rights for guild records. So the limitations on the rune management system and the burdensome cost of the new, basically being double charged to move runes around is something that I think needs to be addressed. I'm not saying you need to just give out mana, or that's not the right emphasis I'm trying to put on it. It's just when you make subtle changes, like you did with the rune management system, the inherent costs change in other aspects of the game. And this is one of the few updates that I've seen in which you've placed sort of an underlying disadvantage without increasing other aspects of the game, in which the cost become the resources that you already have baked in don't match the cost that you just produced. A lot of us back in the day, before World Boss was a thing, before Guild Wars were a thing, we had a lower level cap, lower energy pool, and you addressed some of those issues by raising the level cap to provide for more energy and refreshes. But still, then you added Guild Siege. When you start doing these multiples of cost for participation, it sets a barrier for daily activity. You want people to be more active, but yet you're limiting the amount of activity that is produced based on the content available. Before all this stuff was introduced, I mean, the level cap of 80 energy wasn't that hard to overcome, because all you had to do was grind out the scenario, essentially, and then farm dungeons. Then World Boss is another 30 cost of energy a day, and then 2 guild battles a day, which is another 60. So you're looking at a full energy refresh at that point, just in 2 aspects of the game, being World Boss and Guild Wars. And then now we have Guild Siege, which is another 30 energy. So the incremental increase of adding 10 more energy didn't supplant the new cost of active participation. Now, albeit Comtois did increase the amount of crystals accessible on a daily basis and all those. So there was other ways that they slowly mitigated some of the barriers for players to continuously be active in the game environment. And that's what I'm seeing from this most recent patch, is something that was overlooked in the aspect of pure mana cost and resource drain from having 2 independent rune management systems. The next thing is once again with that FRR that and some negative connotations that were not inherently brought to light, because I know I'm not the only player that has fallen into this trap by not just going into the RTA rune management system for that period of time and just de-runing everything to save some costs. Is new unit acquisition. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is I've been playing now for quite a long time. Alright, we'll go ahead and pop this open so you can take a look. I'm fastly approaching my 2000th day of playing this game. One of the aspects of the game that I find enjoyable is the Pokedex feeling. Is I like collecting all the monsters, I like building all the monsters, I like having the resource available in the niche situation that particular one unit may be used. It's an enjoyable aspect of the game. I played Pokemon, the TCG, when it was first released. I grew up in that sort of mentality, so that's what I find enjoyment out of. So we'll go ahead and take a look at what I'm talking about. Some of you have seen my storage before. I have a lot of units. I build, even though I may never actually put practical use to some of these units. It's just an enjoyment of mine that I get out of the game. And so this has inherently put more of a burden on what I'm doing, trying to manage these multiple different aspects of how I enjoy playing the game. The biggest thing that I've seen is the dual utilization and acquisition of new units. Shortly after this patch dropped, I was fortunate enough, not complaining in the slightest, because Nat 5 sparks are hard enough to get. But I got a couple of new units. And we'll go ahead and I'll highlight this one right now because it seems to be my favorite to play with at the moment. Savannah, the Wind Beast Rider. Now, as you see from the runes on my Savannah, this is what I got in my inventory the moment I summoned the unit. And I was just really excited. I wanted to go build it, try to see what it did, and play test a new unit, a new toy. So it's not overly great, but this is what I did and ran in to go do it. Now, when I wasn't thinking about the crazy part about it was the first instance I thought about this was, hey, look, I have a new RTA toy. I read the kit. It's great for RTA. It seemed overpowered for RTA. So the first thing I did was try to replicate what I thought would be an RTA build for this particular unit. And then I went into RTA and got smoked. And I couldn't figure out. I'm like, what did I do wrong? Obviously the unit's a little slow, and I don't have a complete understanding. It's not like this unit has been out for 4 years and it's been ingrained into our minds how this unit should be built. But what I realized was that the moment I built it, I did what I had been doing for the past 5 years, is jumped right into my monster box, went right to my rune category, and popped runes on it. So when you hop into RTA, that doesn't transfer over when you get a new unit. Now, when the patch was released, I already had 210 units ruined. So just a synaptic misfire on my part, thinking that, hey, once you initially build a unit in your monster box, it's already ruined for RTA. No, it's not. You have to go into RTA and do the same thing. So now let's go ahead and pull up my RTA build. Oh, now you'll see it's a little bit different because when I'm building, I took runes from certain units in my monster box, depleting my mana core, and then having to go rebuild in the RTA rune management system. Because there was different selections available, I was able to get something a little bit better because I had de-runed some stuff. And so it's just a little bit more of a thinking process when you're building a monster, for sure. But having two entirely different non-accessible rune management systems from not from a central point sort of leads to minor errors like this. So the point I'm trying to get at here is one, great function, great feature. I love it for the general purposes of RTA. For the overall play aspect of players. I think it's still lacking and needs to be refined a little bit more. Not knocking Comtois for this. I like I said, I really enjoy the overall feature and the idea and behind the whole rune management system. Just a little bit more refining would do it a lot of justice. Also, the ability to universally manage the runes from one set location, I think would greatly improve the overall viability of this. Of this system. And there was another thing I wanted to talk about on it. The universal rune builds for some units is another thing I going back to the system that I think needs to be somewhat addressed, because like you saw, my Savannah has 2 different builds on it, but I want the RTA build because it's a PvP monster, and I use that PvP monster for other PvP elements of the game. So I think just limiting the rune build specifically for RTA has 2 negative connotations. One being that mana thing. 2, it sort of neglects the other PvP aspects of the game. So one of my solutions is if you're going to do 2 separate systems like this, maybe having a PvP RTA management system versus a PvE management system and combine them, because a lot of these units that people build for RTA you're going to use in Arena, you're going to use in Guild Wars, you're going to use in Siege. So if you're going to keep the prohibited costs like rune removal, paying the removal cost and stuff in the system, then make the system more broadly applicable, so we don't have to try to balance the runes in such a way that it seems like you're not getting the full functionality out of the kits. So I've come up with a little mock that I've just for the rune management system. Something I would like to see implemented. I think it would better help players manage the runes, more appropriately allocate the runes, and have a knowledge of where they are. And so what I did is I took just basically the 2 icons that they already have for the two ways you can access the rune management systems, the generic and then the RTA right here. Put it on the screen where you're building the unit. And that way you could just toggle back and forth between your RTA build and your non-RTA build. Or if you want to encompass it into a PvP versus non-PvP sort of idea, which I think would be great. The next thing is a remove all button. I'm constantly building units. I'm constantly acquiring units. I'm not the only person doing this. So going through and individually removing every rune, especially when you're just trying to damage test something, is it's tedious. It takes a lot of time. There's a lot of dedication, and we're already time invested in other contents of the game, whether it be Guild Wars, Siege, or just farming for materials. So spending time in this aspect of the game, it just diminishes the overall progress a player could be making, I believe. So just simple changes. The other problem that I saw is once you have these 2 different builds, you're literally hunting for these runes depending on what variation of the rune management system you're looking in. If you want to replicate a build that you put on one unit in one system, like I showed you, my Savannah is a little faster in my RTA build, and that's something I want to replicate in my general use rune management system. So now I have to go search and hunt for these particular runes. So at least if I had the ability to toggle back and forth on the same screen, it would limit the amount of time I would have to spend trying to find that rune. So that's just a few quick notes on the rune management system. My generic mock-up of what I would like to see in some of the rune managers, just to make it a little bit more viable and useful rather than feeling like more of a chore toggling back and forth. If you guys have any comments, questions, feel free to leave them at the below. If you think I'm wrong, call me out on it. If you see anything I overlooked and you want me to maybe do a supplemental video on, because I know I don't see everything. Just like everyone else here, I enjoy playing the game, I enjoy learning, and sometimes I get fixated on the way I do things. So maybe you can interject something that maybe I might be overlooking. Hit like on the video, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you.